Hi everyone, Katie again. So last night I got to see a movie that I was kind of excited about. So I happen to be a Christian. I would label myself as a progressive Christian. If you know much about my background, I came from a fundamentalist background. But I do still consider myself a Christian. That is a label that I use to describe myself. And I'm also a boxer. So last night I had a chance to see Big George Foreman. So this is an interesting movie. If you don't know who George Foreman is, he became famous because he won the world heavyweight title back in the 1970s fighting Joe Frazier. And then 20 years later, he won the title again at the age of 45 to become world heavyweight champion. So he is on record as the oldest heavyweight champion ever in boxing and one of the only to make a successful comeback after stopping boxing for a period of time. So George Foreman is a rather outspoken Christian. I do not see eye to eye with him on everything, and I'm not going to go into that, but there's enough overlap between our beliefs that between the boxing and the belief system, I thought, this is interesting. I'm going to go check this out. The one thing I'm really going to concentrate in this video on is specifically the relationship between him and his mother. But as far as the movie goes, the casting was great. Chris Davis was amazing. He plays George Foreman throughout the movie. Forrest Whitaker plays Doc Brodus, who was George Foreman's coach. Great acting. Of course, Forrest Whitaker, he's been around forever. Everybody knows him. He's very famous. No surprise that he'd do a good performance. Really, the casting all around was fantastic. And there were little details throughout the movie that I thought were really good. As a boxer who knows a little bit about George Foreman and his style, I picked on little details that, maybe the average moviegoer wouldn't, and really appreciated that they were included in the choreography of the fights. So, if you look carefully, you'll notice between the 1970s and the 1990s, you'll actually notice some subtle changes in how Chris Davis is portraying his fighting styles. Like in the 90s, he started using this crossguard technique a lot. And you'll actually notice that in the movie. And I thought that was pretty cool, that they actually included, because as he aged and he was heavier and he wasn't as fast on his feet and things, like his style changed. And they didn't just approach the fight choreography with, just go out there and throw punches. They actually choreographed his movements to match up with how George Foreman would have been fighting in each time period. So that was really cool. I really liked that. The one thing that I've seen, I looked up some reviews today just to see what other people thought of the movie, because I liked it. I thought it was a good movie. A lot of people complained about the transitions from different time periods in his life, and I feel that's a little unfair. This is a movie that spans about 35 years. So the movie starts when he's about 10 years old, and he wins the world title at 45 for the second time. So it's like a span of 35 years. And you can't cover 35 years in a 2.5-hour movie without having some jumps in time and place and setting. I didn't feel it was anything that detracted from the movie. I thought it was actually quite good. Excuse me. I liked that it was honest about the earlier years of his life, that he made some choices and decisions that I'm sure he regrets now. It didn't sugarcoat it. It portrayed him as kind of an unsavory character when he was younger. But I guess what really got to me was that throughout the movie, and you'll see it throughout the movie, his mother never believed in him until the very end. But like all throughout his youth, throughout his amateur career, throughout his initial pro career, his Olympic career, all of it, his mother she did not believe in him. And she even expressed, kind of some scorn and shame that he was a boxer. And she looked down on that. I'm going to talk some more about that. So kind of what happens is, he grows up in Houston in a single parent household, very limited money, very limited resources. So he kind of had this chip on his shoulder because people, at least in the movie, kids were harassing him at school about being poor. And he was very self-conscious about it. So as a young adult, he's getting into trouble with the law. There's a scene where he's running from the police, and he does manage to escape in the movie. So he finds this flyer for a thing called the Job Corps, which is like a job training program. And he goes to his mother. His mother's working at this restaurant, so he goes to the restaurant and shows his mother the flyer and says, hey, I'm thinking about this, that, my life isn't going anywhere good, and I want to do better than, mugging people, which is what he had been doing. And first his mother was just like, she was very dismissive, and she's like, well, you're going to leave your family and everybody you've ever known. Why would you want to do that? So he persists, and he's like, I really want to do this. And then she's like, well, I don't want this to just be some halfway thing like everything else you do. And like this lady she did not believe in him. It was difficult to watch and not feel a little bit of resentment toward the mother character in the movie. So he goes to Job Corps, and he's learning different skills. He's learning about circuitry and how to repair radios and electronics and things, and developing career skills. So he meets some key characters who play a role in the movie later. So there's a scene where somebody steals his shoes. His mother had bought him a special pair of sneakers and sent them with him, and somebody stole them. So he chases this guy down, and he's going to beat this guy up. And this is where he gets introduced to Forrest Whitaker's character, Doc Brodus. So he damaged a door in the process of chasing this guy, and Doc tells him, that was destruction of federal property. You could go to prison for that. So he tells him, you're going to have to leave. Here's some money for a bus ticket. I'm going to drive you out of here. And as they're driving out, George Foreman tells him, I can't leave. This is all I've got. So what happens is Doc drives him to this little building. And, it's just a plain white building. It doesn't look like anything special. And tells him, have you ever tried boxing? And George is like, no, I've had street fights. And Doc was like, no, this is, boxing's different. It's a real sport, and it has rules. And so he asked him, would you want to try it? Would you want to learn how to be a boxer? And George Foreman's like, well, yeah, I can fight. So they go inside, and you see his first sparring session, and like the guy just beats the living tar out of him because he doesn't know how to actually box. He's a street fighter. And So George takes it kind of personal. It's like, you took me out there to embarrass me and, make a fool of me in front of everybody. And, long story short, Doc talks him down, gets him calmed down. And it's like, no, this is normal. Everybody that starts boxing starts off feeling like a fool because boxing is a sport and it takes training and experience to be good at it. And so there's like the whole training montage where he's like, jumping rope and punching speed bags and heavy bag work and different things. And so like you see him developing over time through various shots. And so ultimately what happens is he makes the Olympics. He qualifies for the Olympics. He becomes a gold medalist boxer. So along the way, as he's training, he calls his mom to kind of check in, let her know how things are going. And she asks him, hey, what have you been doing? How you doing? And he's like, oh, I've been going to the gym a lot. She's like, oh, did you get into basketball or something? He's like, no, I've actually gotten into boxing. And he was really excited about it. And she was just like ashamed. And she had nothing good to say to him about it. So there again, we see like she didn't believe in him. She didn't believe in what he was doing. She didn't want to support him in the things that he was good at. So he keeps training with Doc, and he becomes an Olympic gold medalist, and he goes to the Olympics, and he actually gets the gold medal. And his mother, like, wouldn't even watch it on TV. Like, she was ashamed of him. Even though he was, reaching the heights of athletic performance that few people can even dream of. So then he and Doc, after the Olympics, there's a whole thing with, the racial tension at the time, and people saw him as a sellout because, while other athletes were being a little more politically active because of the things that were happening with civil rights at the time, people criticized him for not saying or doing certain things. I won't get into that too much, but it's in the movie. It's there. And it comes back later in the fight with Ali. There's a scene where Ali kind of pokes at him a little bit about it. Anyway, so he goes pro. So Doc introduces him to some other people who are going to get him into the pro ranks. And he eventually works his way up to fighting for the heavyweight world championship against Joe Frazier. And his mother the whole way is unsupportive, does not believe in him, thinks it's foolishness, doesn't think he should be doing it. And he wins. He beats Joe Frazier and becomes the heavyweight world champion. And all the while, his mother's just like, I'm ashamed of you. Even after he buys her a house and everything, she's just like very dismissive toward him. So he eventually has his fight with Muhammad Ali, which he lost in, I think it was the 8th round. And leading up to that fight was when Ali was saying some things about being a flag waver and stuff. And so George Foreman really hated Muhammad Ali at that point because he really took that personally. He was very offended by it. And a little while later, he loses a fight to Jimmy Young. And this is the scene where after the fight in the locker room, he loses consciousness. And when he wakes up, everybody's like, man, you almost died. And he's like, I did. And so I don't really know the whole story about what happened internally, but he says, I want to live for Jesus now. So that was his conversion experience. That's when he became a preacher. And he says, I'm done boxing. Hanging up my gloves, I'm done. I'm going to be a preacher now. And so there's some scenes where he goes out and he's at a church and he's telling people about his story, and then he's like out on a street preaching and different things like that. And he ended up getting divorced along the way. So he meets another woman at a church that he's preaching at, and she plays a role, a critical role in his later re-entry into the heavyweight ranks. But basically, for a number of years, he had this little church he preached at, and that was his thing. And then at some point, a grandmother brings her grandson to him and says, hey, my grandson's got some behavioral stuff going on, and he really could use somebody to help him focus and have something productive. Could you train him to be a boxer? And what I really appreciate about this movie is they portray George Foreman's response as a negative thing. Because as somebody who was a fundamentalist who heard this kind of response a lot about everything, I felt it was the right thing to do in the movie to show that this was the wrong way to respond. Because George's response is basically, he just needs more Jesus. He just needs to read the Bible more. He'll be fine. He doesn't need boxing. And so like 2 weeks later, George is at home watching the TV, and it's the news, and here's a picture of this kid, and he was in major trouble with the law. And so George has this moment of realization that I could have changed this kid's life. I could have prevented this. I could have changed all of this, and this kid's probably going to spend a long time in prison now because I said, you just need Jesus. I just copped out. And I felt that was exactly how it needed to be portrayed because, as somebody who was a fundamentalist who heard that kind of thing a lot, that, well, the answer to everything is using more Jesus, is no, people need people. We need each other. That's why we have each other here in this world, is we need each other. We need to be in each other's lives and help each other. And so that was how he built this youth center. He said, I'm going to build a youth center where kids who maybe don't have a stable home life or just need to get away and have an outlet can go and, they can learn boxing, they can have basketball, they can just run around or whatever. So he built this youth center. And they operate it for some number of years, and things are going pretty well, and then they have money trouble. And so, long story short, that's how he gets back into boxing. So, he says, we can't pay the bills, and I know how to do two things. I know how to preach, and I know how to box, and preaching isn't paying the bills right now. So he gets out his gloves, and he gets out his bags, and he starts training again, and then he goes and he finds Doc and says, hey, can you train me to box again? And so, there's the whole thing with like him getting back in shape and everything. So to condense it, he gets back into fighting shape. He starts getting some fights, and he starts getting back into the pro ranks again. And everybody's pretty amazed. And so he eventually has a title fight with Moorer. This is when he actually won the title. And his mother still wouldn't watch. So like there's a TV set up at the gym at his youth center, and like everybody's crowded around it watching it to see how he does. And like his mother's just like up on a mezzanine with her back turned toward it. She wouldn't even watch. I thought, what kind of a mother are you? Like, this is your son going for the biggest achievement that anybody could get. And he's doing it for the second time in his life. And she wouldn't even watch. And then at the end of the fight, she did. She turned around, she came and she looked down at the screen, and she saw what happened. But that's what I thought was really heartbreaking about this movie, was like, this woman, who was his mother, never believed in him. Always cast doubt on everything he did. the only time she was ever happy with him was when he decided to become a preacher. And I felt like, as a parent, and I have kids of my own, for me to consider my desires for my kids and what I want them to be as more important than who they are and what they're good at, I just find that so atrocious. And like, at the end of the movie, I thought, his mother really was not a good person. She never believed in him. She didn't see the good in what he was doing. And I felt that, if there's a message to take away from this movie, don't let other people define who you are and what you do. George Foreman didn't do that. He didn't let his mother define what he did or who he was, and I think that's a good message. He went out and became the best in the world twice, in spite of the fact that his own mother didn't believe in him. So, if you're into boxing, and maybe if you happen to be a Christian, but even if you're just into boxing, I recommend the movie. It's pretty good. I thought it was, pretty well done, and yeah, I liked it. I think it's worth watching. So until next time, have a great week. Bye.